This is The Blockchain Show.
The Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies and promotes widespread adoption of cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
You're listening to episode number 39.
Today's episode features 3 segments. In the first, Blockchain Show host Steve Anderson talks to Samit Singh and Dondry Taylor of Decentralized News Network, a political news platform combining news creation with decentralized networks to deliver factual content, curated by the community. In the second segment, Steve interviews Michael Adam, founder of DocLaunch and Bank My Bit, as well as Girish Ramchandra, senior manager for professional services firm Whipley, about their work to build out a document management platform on blockchain. In the third segment, Steve chats with blockchain enthusiast Chris Robertson, who runs the blockchain t-shirt and paraphernalia shop, The Blockchain Store.
After college, I got more into startups and design. And actually, Don and I both met at the previous startup that we worked at, and we just clicked and started working together. It's been about 6 years since we started working together, yeah. And we've dealt a lot with startups in general, and we both come from a very traditional like web and mobile development design background. And about a year ago, we moved into blockchain, and specifically Ethereum, and eventually sort of came up with the idea for DNN. Based on a lot of what we were seeing during the U.S. election with the mainstream media's behavior of sort of like twisting facts and sort of like misleading people when it comes to like, you know, what's important and what's not important in terms of like the overall political landscape in the U.S. especially. And, you know, you look at the numbers now, especially, I know the latest Gallup poll, the numbers are at a historic low in terms of the amount of people who distrust the media. And the more we thought about it, we started, you know, bouncing ideas back and forth off of each other. And, you know, we thought to ourselves, what if we could have some sort of decentralized network where there was no main authority governing the type of news that got published in the platform? And, you know, what if there was a network that could vet the news for accuracy and kind of scour through everything the writer wrote and get something published in the network that could not be taken down because it would enjoy the immutability of blockchain? And so that's sort of where the concept for DNN came from long before we started working on it.
Yeah, so just to add on to what Sam was saying, I guess a little bit about me. I come from more of like a technical background. You know, so after graduating from college, we worked at the same startup. I did more of the, you know, the web front end, the back end. And then from that startup, we kind of shifted towards mobile. So we both worked on a couple apps together for iOS. And then, you know, right around like towards the end of making those apps, you know, then the election started happening. You know, just everything that's been going on with the coverage just kind of caught our eye to, like, you know, just how biased certain news publications will cover certain candidates. And then we kind of just came into the idea of, like, you know, it would be nice if there was a platform that, you know, people can get together, vet news, and, you know, writers can publish about the issue of having the publication kind of tilt what they write. So, you know, we were looking at kind of like Bitcoin at the time. You know, Ethereum wasn't there yet. So then I would say, like, a couple months later, you know, Ethereum came onto the scene, and you know, we just started noticing that you can create these decentralized apps that allow you that essentially run without any like central authority or any central server. So we kind of thought, like, you know, hey, it would be nice if we can build this platform on top of Ethereum that would allow people to, you know, vet news. And that's kind of how we, you know, came to the idea of creating DNN. That's who we are now.
How does the vetting of news go? Do you think that there's not enough coverage of things like Pizzagate, or do you think that there's, you know, not enough coverage of things like the Comey investigation? What sort of stuff is the media getting wrong, and how can DNN do a better job?
I think a big problem right now in the media industry is this rampant issue that we keep hearing about of fake news, where, you know, now the anatomy of fake news, it's like tough to trace back where a lot of this stuff originates. But social media, of course, plays a big factor. We all inhabit these echo chambers on platforms like Facebook and Twitter, which almost substantiate our own confirmation bias. Hence, you know, you see a sensationalistic piece of like fake content in your newsfeed, you'll be very inclined to share it with others. And a lot of it stems from publications being almost predictably liberal or conservative at this point. Like, if you read, let's say, the New York Times, you're going to see more of a liberal tilt versus if you get your news from Fox, you're going to get more of a conservative tilt. And it's these political affiliations have become almost predictable, and they've fractured the industry, I think, where we're all sort of being pandered to by these respective organizations. And sometimes, you see things like articles mentioning things like Pizzagate, and a lot of these articles come about also from these bigger and more supposedly trusted organizations as part of their own agenda to undermine, others. And it's just crazy how quickly a lot of fake news spreads. Hence, now you're seeing bigger platforms like Facebook getting into fact checking, especially in Germany, where it's required that when a journalist gets something published on Facebook, it needs to be vetted by a third-party fact-checking entity that Facebook goes to. But the problem is they're getting a lot of these things checked after the fact. So by the time something's already published and spread, the damage has already been done. As much as bias is a big problem, with DNN, we're a lot more wary of the fake news aspect. And so more of our emphasis in terms of fact-checking is put on making sure that the writer has anything presented as a fact properly sourced within their article, and those sources can then be traced back individually by the reader, and the reader can essentially come up, with their own conclusion about how they feel about a certain issue, rather than being told to feel a certain way.
Better able to determine whether something is bullshit or not. How can we have people's bullshit detectors be a lot better than they are? Because I see some of the news that gets spread on social media, and with the slightest bit of fact checking, you can tell that a story is
I mean, the thing about DNN, I mean, what we want for the reader to do is just have more of an active role in checking the sources. I think us, the reader, we become very passive in the way we consume news. Yeah. So it's more we're just, as a matter of fact, we don't even go into articles. If you look at what a lot of people do, they just kind of scroll down the feed and read the titles. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create this platform to and have people engage in what they're reading, question it, be skeptical, look at the sources, go see where the writer got the source. So we just want to create that type of environment, and because we're on the blockchain, reward them for doing that.
Yeah, ideally, we'd like writers who produce content that essentially respect the reader by citing, everything they used as a source or inspiration for their article, so the reader can essentially trace everything back to the material that the writer used to produce said content. So I think depending, a lot of this comes down to design. Depending on how we present an article on DNN to the reader, we'll make the reader smarter about knowing what type of content they're looking at. Based on how the writer essentially cites everything.
So I was thinking a while back about how Augur is doing things, and there was. Are you familiar with Augur?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Augur is phenomenal.
Yeah, we spoke briefly with Joey Krug actually.
What was that conversation like?
Oh, well, I actually was just more questioning how they prevent people from kind of colluding on the platform. Yep. So, if you look at Augur, you have so many components where, people can, kind of get together and, agree to, predict in a certain way. And, that can, kind of influence the payouts. So I was curious on how they went about it.
Yeah, a lot of these community-centric platforms are very similar to us in so many ways, including Augur.
So one of my questions would be if Augur had a way where the people who were making predictions were then able to write articles, news articles, you'd be able to sit there and be like, oh, this person, was reporting facts about the election. They got it right 99% of the time. So I want to, take their aspect of it, where it was a different person that is always wrong, say like a Jim Cramer who's wrong, 90% of the time. I don't want to listen to him. Is that something part of how DNN works, where people who are correct or people who produce true stories are rewarded with a DNN token more often than people who produce false stories, or how does this work?
So actually, yeah, let's.
Yeah, so the whole platform basically that we built is based on reputation. So if you're starting with the writer, so the way we gauge reputation for the writer is basically if they have more articles accepted by the group of reviewers than rejected. We have sort of like a ratio that acts as their reputation. So the way it works is when the writer submits an article to the network, we essentially have reviewers place bids to review these articles. The reviewer doesn't know anything about what article they're going to be reviewing, just that they know that they're bidding to review some article that gets submitted. Our system then selects basically 7 random reviewers based on how they bid. And then what they do is they have to review the articles in isolation. And then basically the majority vote, like if the majority of them voted to accept the article or reject the article, that would be the determination. And as far as the reputation for reviewers works, is we do it in such a way that if they voted more times with the majority than the minority, then they have a positive reputation. So that's kind of how it works with writers.
Yeah, and basically when reviewers are bidding for an article, they're actually putting up a stake for said article. So, those are the tokens basically that will be lost if they vote against the majority, and that's basically how our consensus works overall. Yes. Voting with the majority, you win, so to speak, and voting against the majority, you lose. But the way it works is that the reviewers, they don't know each other's identities. They don't know anything about the other's decisions on any given article. So the platform does not make it aware which article you were selected for. So you might be selected for one article that was on the top of the queue, on the queue, and then another reviewer might be accepted for another article. Yeah, and then you have to essentially cast your vote. Now the way it would work, we're kind of tapping into like game theory here. So so what we're trying to do is make it have it economically be incentive positive for you to vote based on our guidelines rather than your biases. So, like if, for example, an article came in and talked about like the U.S. president, you didn't really like him, you could, in theory, vote. Okay, I'm going to just reject every article about that particular topic. However, you're also making the assumption that those other reviewers would do the same thing, and if you're wrong, you can lose tokens. So that's kind of right. So it sort of makes it expensive to attempt to include, much in the way that also Augur tries to do.
Does every reader have to be a reviewer, or are you only?
Yeah, so the way the platform works, like and all the roles are interchangeable. So a reader can be a writer can be a reviewer. Like we don't make any distinction in that regard. However, the reputation does stay the same. Like so, we have 3 separate reputation systems for each type of action, and then the more you do that action would contribute to that type of reputation. And that's how. Yeah,
but roles, ideally, what we're hoping is that roles will be more fluid. Readers won't feel compelled to only be readers during, their entire experience at DNN, and same goes for writers and reviewers. Hopefully we might see some reviewers making the jump to being writers, and vice versa.
I'm sorry, I'm reminded of a joke about Superman and how the most unrealistic aspect of Superman is that there's a journalist with a job.
Yep. Yeah, right.
Is this going to help journalists income-wise, or will they be better under a world with DNN or worse off?
Yeah, so we get this question a lot. I mean, a lot of journalists like that we've talked to have said, "Hey, I want to make a living off this. Like, is it feasible for me to use your platform to completely substitute what I'm doing?" And our answer to that is upfront, no. So if you're looking to use our platform to make a living upfront, then you're not gonna that's not gonna happen. However, what we hope to happen is in the long term by contributing to the platform in the long term, that's gonna increase the value of the token, which will then be your economic reward for doing that.
Yeah, as much as we would love for DNN to be able to pay rent basically. It's tough to say right now until we actually see it in practice and we see the value of the token fluctuate accordingly. But the way we're looking at it now, DNN could be a really good gig on the side. A lot of our formatting for the articles deal with shorter pieces. So far in our white papers we've specified, articles are going to be shorter than usual. They're not going to be huge op-eds. And the reason for this is, it takes less time for the writer, but also it takes less time for the reviewer. The shorter an article is, the less reviewable surface area there is for a reviewer. So the quicker they're able to look through something and get it published to the blockchain and have it displayed on the network for the readers. But this shorter length, of articles, imposing a maximum limit on characters also forces the writer to be, more brief and pump out articles quicker than they would on average. And if articles are very, quick and simple to put out on DNN, it's reasonable to say that it could work out as a good, gig on the side to bring in extra income. And that, that's what we would like right now with DNN. Now, over time, who knows? Maybe, our token could be valuable enough to be, serve as more than a side gig. But, at the moment, I think the economic incentive is going to be a little smaller than that.
Is there a token sale on the way?
We will be doing a crowd sale, yes. We'll be announcing that when we're ready. At the moment, where we are right now is we have our white paper published. We're basically just revising that, adding to it, taking out things that maybe are irrelevant now, that were relevant at the time we wrote them, things like that. And we have an alpha that's being actively developed, and that should be ideally wrapped up next week and released on the COVID testnet.
Yeah, so a little about the white paper. So we actually opened the white paper up for peer review by the general public. So we've been, receiving a lot of really interesting feedback on, would there be collusion or, can I make a living, questions like that. So, we've been just answering those questions. And as far as our contracts, all our contracts have pretty much been developed. And right now our alpha will be on the COVID testnet on Ethereum.
Sometime after that, we will be announcing an ICO before we go into beta. So, at the very least, we're at least going to have a tangible product for people to actually check out and see before we do any ICO.
What do you think about the ICO space right now where, Bancor raised $140 million. Right now, today, Status, I don't know why they pronounce it Status. They're British and not English, and I say status, but so Status is going to raise, I don't know how much today. It's going on right now. It seems like all you need is a web page and some marketing, and you can raise millions of dollars. And you know what? The tokens that are, they're going up in value. I mean, they're going down compared to ETH, but they're going up for USD. What's the space? What's your opinion on the whole ICO space?
Yeah, we definitely think it's pretty crazy right now. Just the fact that you can just, like you said, create a website, create a white paper. Actually, we came across a parody website of that where it was just hey, you want to do an ICO? All right, step one, create a fancy website, create a countdown, put a white paper, make it look technical so no one understands it, and then you're good. But I think long term that'll definitely kind of damage. It'll definitely hinder the industry here.
At the same time, there's a reason a lot of people compare the blockchain space to right before the first .com bubble. Yeah. We're sort of mid 90s, late 90s. That's the stage we're sort of at, where it's we have a very dedicated community around this space, but it hasn't yet hit the mainstream, and there's a lot of frothiness as far as investment's concerned. That any ICO that comes out gets really heated up in the sense that they raise. You're seeing instances where people are raising, the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars within the span of 10 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's something that we've never seen before, ever. It's incredible. And, a lot of it comes down to, I guess, the lack of transparency with a lot of the companies putting out these ICOs. But at the same time, there's just so much enthusiasm amongst the community that it's inevitable that a lot of these ICOs get pumped up filled really, really quickly. And down the line, I guess we'll see how much of this enthusiasm was warranted. And in the long term, I'm pretty positive though. And this entire method of investment was essentially it's kind of like Kickstarter applied to blockchain projects. And it's just interesting to see, especially when it comes to tokens. And you're seeing a lot of these applications being tokenized and adding another layer of value for shareholders.
Right. Yeah, and I think, when it comes down to the token, I think the way you can kind of decipher the ones that are just there to kind of speculate versus the ones that are there for, for the long term is just if that token has an actual value in the platform. I think that's what we've been focusing on the most is just, how can we make sure that this token incentivizes the actions that are, best propel the platform, to the highest it can possibly be. And I think when you look at, a lot of these ICOs, the ones that will succeed are the ones that have that built in. And, I guess, once there's successful dApps, I think things will stabilize.
Right now it's we're in a very sort of irrational environment, obviously, where you see a lot of these ICOs springing up and filling up very quickly without even having product and just having a very basic stripped down white paper and a fancy website. Right now there's a lot of irrational exuberance amongst people, but I do think that will eventually correct itself and lead to sort of rational exuberance, where we see these companies essentially just being more transparent. And I think we will see a sort of a weeding out, so to speak, of people who don't even reveal much about their own projects. And, I think it should be sort of a requirement that you at least have some minimal viable product out there for people to see and feel and look at. It'll definitely your product better.
It'll definitely follow the traditional web form where it's now you go to an investor and say, hey, I have this awesome idea, in the traditional web form or social app, and they're gonna be like, all right, well, come back when you have users. I think it's gonna be the same thing for this. It's gonna be like, all right, well, we want to see an actual product on the testnet. We want to start using it.
Yep, it's funny. This is also very similar to the era post Facebook.
Yeah,
where we saw apps springing up left and right and raising tens of millions of dollars in seed funding and Series A rounds out of nowhere almost with no ad. So it's a pretty similar landscape where I do think we'll eventually see some level of rationality where companies will be forced to be more transparent about what they're doing and having something to show for what they're doing, something tangible for the consumers to use and look at.
Are there any companies in the space right now that you think have a really great product that you're interested in as well? Obviously excluding DNN.
I like First Blood a lot.
Yeah,
personally, I love what they're doing. Augur, of course, and
Augur is supposed to be coming out. Actually, they just did an update on where they are with the project right now. So they're still kind of but definitely Augur's.
First Blood. Steve has been a big inspiration for us. Actually, the more you look at it, it's like a Reddit on the blockchain, but they deal with a lot of the same community issues that we deal with, and we've really studied their white paper, and we love a lot of their viewpoints when it comes to running the community, when it comes to dealing with collusion and bad behavior, and we've definitely taken a lot of inspiration from Steve, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
But First Blood's really intriguing. Status for sure. I just love the whole concept of having a sort of WeChat on the Ethereum blockchain. It could definitely serve as, a portal for a lot of people unfamiliar with crypto. And what better way to start than with a more traditional messaging app?
Yeah, First Blood was one of those interesting ones that I think originally they just had a website and a white paper and raised I think $7 million equivalent, which is now 40x'd. So they have a huge runway. And I think they recently announced that they're doing the first tournament. Is it the first? Do you know what tournament they're doing? I forget what it was.
I don't know which one, but I know they're doing. I know it's going to happen really soon. I believe in the summer. But it's crazy. We really respect Augur because they have an actual product, and they're clearly meeting their goals on the roadmap as well, and instilling confidence in people that way. But they have something, which is phenomenal. Like a lot of these projects that we're interested in, they have something to look at, get a better sense of, how they work, aside from just having a white paper to read through.
Yeah, when Augur first, debuted, I went and looked at their website, and the idea was really cool, but it still wasn't there yet front-end wise. For what they raised, it's just I hate to say things like that, but I've gone back recently, and it's gotten a lot better. Yep. It's looking really nice, really sharp nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last one you mentioned was what? Steam It.
Steam It.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
It's definitely interesting. There's not much you can make per post. Am I right? Like maybe.
You're right.
Correct. Yeah. There's a lot of people on the platform actually talking about that. Like, I made a post, it was really good, but I didn't get much payout from that. So yeah, it does suffer from that. Also, the fact that I think, there's a lot of, I don't want to say barrier to entry, but it does take a little bit of knowledge to know how you convert your Steam dollars and vice versa. And
they have a lot of sophistication with their token.
Yes.
How do people, do people have to do the mental math on DNN of do like a DNN to Ether to USD to kind of figure out, what they're risking, or how do you make it easy for users who, are just normal people who can't do amazing mathematics with decimal points to 8
Yeah, so this is actually where our background from traditional web and mobile come in. So Sam and I were big and very keen on like very minimal UIs, very nice UIs that kind of, get the point across to using the platform without doing much explanation. So when we were designing DNN, when Sam, pretty much put together a lot of the screens, we made sure that it was very, very simple and that we extracted all of the technical know-how of the blockchain. Like, for example, like the term gas. Like, we don't even use the term gas. We use, the term like fee, stuff that people can associate with. And then as far as, like, being able to convert from DNN to, like, Ether and vice versa, we do all of that for you on the platform. So, you can either view things in your native currency or you can view it in Bitcoin at the current market rate. So yeah, that's pretty much how we've designed it.
What do you think about the congestion? You mentioned Bitcoin. What do you think is going on with Bitcoin? I look at Bitcoin and my wife used it for the first time the other day to buy like breakfast at a place, and there was a $4 transaction fee, and like she immediately like, this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our take on Bitcoin. All right, first off, we love Bitcoin. Right? I mean, we love the fact that they were the first to make this.
Yeah, they essentially enabled Ethereum.
Yeah,
to spring out.
And like our whole thing is just like, the developers just have like a certain way of doing things. The community wants to change certain aspects, and I think there's just this constant clash, and I think that's what's kind of hindering it from like becoming better. Whether the developers are right.
There's definitely a big political divide, as we know.
Absolutely. With like SegWit and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping it. I know for sure that Bitcoin's here to stay forever. A lot of people are like, oh, what happens if Bitcoin goes down? Like, I think it's here for the long run. I don't think it's going anywhere. But yeah, I mean, I definitely hope that the divide kind of lowers so that we make some more progress.
That being said, I do think, Bitcoin does have its limitations.
Yeah.
Yep.
How are you guys going to handle transaction speed? You're on. Is there any sort of side chain for DNN, or is it all an ERC20 token, or has that not been decided? Is there any sort of separate way to handle a little more transaction throughput per second?
Yeah. So, at the moment, we're not developing like a sidechain, although like it's definitely been suggested to us to have sidechain to have additional functionality. Like Raiden. We actually spoke with the founders of Raiden for a bit on ways we can integrate with them. But yeah, I mean, I think for now it's just we just have smart contracts. We're just going to be like a simple dApp and see where that goes. And then if building a sidechain would enable us to do more, we'll definitely.
Yeah, we've definitely been looking to rate it a lot, actually.
Yeah,
and it's more or less going to depend on how the alpha goes.
Yeah,
and once we're able to get like a more of a precise measurement, I want to say, on how exactly this thing's going to run in practice, we could definitely integrate rating at that point. Yeah, absolutely.
You guys both use the phrase DApp, which is what I use as well. I often hear DApp. What's your opinion on DApp versus DApp?
It kind of annoys me when people say DApp.
Yeah. It's funny. Like even the spelling, I know it's like capital D, capital A, and lowercase e. So, but it's really interesting. I think actually, I'm glad that Vitalik released this blog post early on about just explaining to people what decentralized means. Because I think there's a lot of confusion around like what it actually means. Like some people think, oh, like decentralized means like the creators of the protocol don't do anything. Like everybody is supposed to be the ones that dictate how it works.
It's autonomous.
It's autonomous. And I think Vitalik did a great job of explaining like there's logical decentralization where like all the ideas come from the community, and then there's decentralized the infrastructure. So I think like what we're trying to do is kind of a mixture of like both. So DNN the entity, we don't want to have anything to do with like dictating
right. We don't want there to be any central agenda. Which is something that plagues a lot of mainstream news corporations. There's always some hidden agenda in the background that's governing what writers write about, what gets published, what readers eventually look at. We didn't want any of that to be involved in DNN. So in that sense, there isn't any political centralization.
So there's no like advertisers or owners that are, making sure that their point gets across.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. The way we wanted to structure it was that, it could be a platform that could viably be run by nothing more than a network of readers, writers, and reviewers. You have writers putting out content. That content goes to reviewers in the network who pretty much are in full control of whether that article gets published or not published. And these are all random reviewers. It's not like there's a set group of reviewers because that would eventually give way to a political agenda, more or less. But, a lot of this it becomes a self-sustaining organism, basically, that's underpinned by the network.
Do you ever think about adding like press releases to your site? I know that the current model for press releases today, it's like you pay a ridiculous amount of money to a company like PR Newswire to basically say whatever you want to say, and it's really completely broken. But if you had like in your system, somebody could write a press release and the journalist would review whether this is actual news or not.
Yeah, we've definitely been thinking about doing like other forms of news. Something like that could very well be interesting. I think it just comes down to us testing like our review process and just how strong and robust it is, and just making sure that it's not vulnerable to certain types of collusion. I think if it's not, I think if the alpha goes well, we'd definitely be open to it.
Yeah, if we're able to identify how we can at least mitigate certain threatening attack vectors. The beauty of DNN is it can really be anything. We're only dealing with political news right now because it's one of the hottest things that people love to read about. It's one of the most polarizing topics. Politics is always very, very polarizing, especially these days, and very few topics of news provoke more argument than politics. And the way we look at it, a lot of that rampant fake news that we were talking about earlier, a lot of it stems from politics, and just the entire political sphere in general deals with overall mainstream media distrust. And right now we're strictly dealing with politics, but down the line, depending on how robust we see our review process working, it could work for other types of news and other types of models altogether. And this way of fact checking, by an anonymous network could give way to a lot of different types of news content on DNN, and just more ways for the writer to contribute to the network rather than sticking to one subject.
Yeah, just to also add on, and just giving you a kind of a big picture of we're still deciding if we would go this route, but so we're going to start with pretty much U.S. political news. Start with just for the fact that we're in the U.S. and we kind of understand the landscape
It's
there.
comfortable to start with a niche before branching out.
But eventually it could be interesting if you can imagine a DNN in different geo locations around the world. Publish news in, say, I don't know, China, and we go to a DNN in China of people that can basically vet that type of news, since they're in that area and they know that.
Yeah, actually, one of our biggest issues early on was when we were kind of conceptualizing everything and started talking to other people about it. One of the first pieces of feedback we got was like, all right, well, what if I'm in China and I'm a reviewer on DNN and I get assigned to some article that's dealing with the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't have much knowledge about that, being that I'm in China and I'm mainly knowledgeable in Chinese politics and occurrences, and maybe I'm not the best person to review this piece of news, and maybe even the readers in China wouldn't necessarily care as much since it may not relate to them. So that's when we started thinking, well, maybe initially, very early on, we should strictly deal with U.S. political news and then branch out to different geographical areas and move on, which is where it started becoming more intriguing because, people started emailing us asking for if they could eventually have their own localized versions. We actually had this guy in Brazil reach out to us who was part of some Brazilian political party, and they want to run for office, and they would like their own version of DNN in Brazil. And wanted a Portuguese version of DNN, a Japanese version of DNN, and the more we thought about it, well, we figured, okay, it would be easy to localize DNN in these different markets, but localization alone in terms of changing the language will only be so effective. But what if people in Brazil saw their own type of news content that they would only see in Brazil, related to them, and no one else in any other country accessing DNN would see that news? So it's like having different versions, different nodes, basically, of DNN in different geographical regions. So it's really interesting to think about that. We've had more people reach out to us, essentially, who want to not only get it translated, but want to contribute their own, news relating to their own geopolitical region. And, we were very intrigued by the thought of having different DNNs, so to speak, in different territories entirely.
What do you think would be the first territory that you bring on besides United States? Think it'd be Brazil or China? Or?
It's funny you mentioned China. China is the first thing in our mind.
Yeah.
Actually, we've gotten a lot of interesting feedback from people in China, and this is something that really resonates with them. I remember one of the first things we heard from someone in China was he said, "Well, political news in China, as you know, is a joke." So this could be extremely interesting to see in the Chinese market. If it's on the blockchain, there's only so much the government will be able to do about it in terms of suppressing it. All this content would be immutable and wouldn't be able to be taken down, except by DNN itself, if that were to even happen. But
so a little bit,
even we can remove the blockchain.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and a little bit about how you can access DNN. So we're taking a little bit of a different approach than Steemit. So Steemit, the way Steemit runs, it actually runs on a centralized server. So it's on the blockchain, but the server in which you access the website is centralized. So we're taking a different approach by decentralizing the website as well. So you essentially download DNN if you want to host articles on your machine. And then other people can essentially connect to your machine to access the articles that are on the Ethereum blockchain on our contracts, making it further decentralized.
So
it's really been interesting to gauge the Chinese reception.
Are the articles on the Ethereum blockchain, or is it just a link to somebody hosting the article?
Yeah, so at the moment we're integrated with IPFS. So all the articles themselves get stored in IPFS, a bunch of nodes in IPFS, and then we reference those nodes by hash on our smart contracts, then get consumed by our front end.
IPFS, for those who don't know, it's interplanetary file system, and it's just a remaking of the web, where anybody can host a node and then produce unalterable content. So if any part of the content changes, then the link to that article changes. So there's no there's no way to make any changes to it. So it's a very hardened web that's uncensorable.
We've been hugely invested in it. Oh, yeah, absolutely. A lot of the conferences we went to, we actually kind of, saw Juan talk there, and very, very amazing platform. Definitely like the direction that the project's going in. Very interesting.
Yeah, so it's definitely been, I'd say, back to your question, I'd say China would be that first territory that we would think of expanding to. And, based on the feedback we've gotten so far, it's something that really resonates with people. They deal with the issue of censorship more than most places. And it's just amazing how the government really goes out of their way to actively suppress any dissent. So I think a platform like DNN, which, hosts content that's immutable and uncensorable, it could definitely be very interesting to see how that unfolds in the Chinese market. So, yeah, that would definitely be one of the first places we look at outside of the U.S. for sure.
It's one of the things that I mentioned, a few times on the show, that before, blockchain, there was written history, but it wasn't like recordable history. Anybody could, change it, and, there's books that get edited, and, the content gets changed, and the history is kind of written by whoever wins the story, wins the... Right. And with something like blockchain and DNN, you can verify, you can have this, article, this short, simple article put out to the community, and based off of, monetary rewards, people would decide whether it is a legit, true article or not. And then once that gets in the blockchain, it's there forever. Nobody can take it down. Nobody can censor it. I mean, this has, big political impact worldwide.
Yeah, you actually summed up DNN quite well.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Actually, it's very interesting. At our AMA, someone brought up a really interesting use case for us. Yeah. And they were like, because one of the things we got is like, what if I have my, a blogger of some sort, or there's a news organization that doesn't want to host their stuff through DNN and have it accessible there. Well, I said one of the things that could be interesting is you can use DNN as kind of a proof of verification of events. So people can essentially send their article through DNN, and then DNN essentially would generate this proof that it's been vetted or fact checked. Because the way the current fact checking system is, you have to essentially trust that the organization did due diligence on whatever was published. And then what you can use is you can use that reference on DNN on your own article. Here's this hash on my article that it's been vetted by the community.
Yeah, and it definitely adds just a really big layer of authenticity to the content. I mean, it's true, exactly what Don said. When you're reading something, reviews from a supposedly respected and reliable news source, you really have to take what they say as their word and sort of trust that they vetted their news for accuracy. But then, a lot of times after the fact, we find out that they have to backtrack on something they said, or that something was just grossly misrepresented or inaccurate based on whether it's their own political agenda or the lack of rigorous fact-checking. Over here, as far as DNN is concerned, in our context, everything's very, viewable by anyone. You can see who was involved with the publication of any given article that you were reading and kind of trace the history back from the origin of the article. And a lot of that, I guess, also mirrors the functionality of the blockchain, and that's the beauty of it.
One of the things that I've heard before, I forget where it was, who said it or in what context it was said, but if you've ever, read a news story about something that you're very, very familiar with, you can see all the inaccuracies and just how little the journalist really knows about what they're writing typically. Not all the time, but it's very typical to, a journalist writes their knowledge of a subject that you're an expert in is really terrible. And you kind of forget when you're reading articles about subjects that you're not really familiar with. You forget that news articles are bad across the board as far as what the journalist knows and how accurately they represent reality with their story.
Yeah, it's like, let's take crypto as an example.
Yeah,
why is it that a lot of mainstream media organizations discuss the scams associated with crypto, ransoms and so on and so forth, rather than focusing on the positive impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, they love to show stories of like Silk Road, for example, like, oh, look what you can do with Bitcoin. You can like buy drugs and you can buy this stuff. But but they forget that cash is also untraceable, and you can use cash for the same thing and find it. So it's just
it's interesting. Like you talk to the a lot of people we've talked to about Bitcoin usually say the same thing. Like, well, it's a Ponzi scheme, so on and so forth. And a lot of that mirrors what they read about in the mainstream media, who usually doesn't cover crypto that favorably, as opposed to people who are actively involved in the community and are knowledgeable and are experts on the subject. So it's definitely interesting to think about. And the more we started working on our white paper and just designing the overall product, the more it hit us that what if we made the community held them to a higher degree of accountability, make sure that things published in the platform are factually accurate, more reliable as an alternative to mainstream media. And the way we would do that is impose like a set of balances and economic balances and counterbalances to sort of get people to behave the way we want them to behave on the platform. And in this way we sort of create this web of trust between readers, writers, reviewers, and you basically know exactly what went into getting a certain article published, as we said earlier. It's just crazy to see how a lot of the mainstream media handles certain topics. That it's just, especially crypto is still one of the crazy ones. That even now we're still seeing comments on articles from New York Times and Wall Street Journal that people calling things like Ethereum and Bitcoin Ponzi schemes. It's insane.
Where exactly was anybody promised like high returns if they invested in this stuff? It's like it's a gamble.
It's interesting. I don't know where that came from. It's like
no clue.
I think it's become to the point. I mean, even within the crypto community, some of us do that just to like kind of put down other currencies to value the ones that they've invested in. So like there's a lot of that going on. But yeah, it's I don't know how it kind of spread.
But there are a lot of scams in this. There's a word that nascent. Everybody keeps using that word lately. Like a relatively new technology. There's like OneCoin, and then there's other, like my Ether wallet often gets hit with people, copying their code and changing a few things on it. So there's definitely, you got to be careful in this space. But if you know what you're talking about, it's the least scammy of anything out there, really.
Exactly. A lot of people people that aren't necessarily knowledgeable about crypto, not all people, but like certain groups of people, of course, they love pointing out the negatives of, again, like kind of what people spend their Bitcoin on and things like that, and sort of blaming the technology. But, if you really look at it, technology isn't inherently bad. It's the way a lot of people use it. For that matter, when we went to the Consensus Conference previously, a lot of people were mentioning the same subject, and how, like, Skype, for that matter, has been used many times in Eastern Europe for child trafficking. So it's like it's the same thing. I mean, you can find any negative point really in any part of the industry, not just crypto. Yet for some reason, a lot of organizations in the press seem to be more eager to point out the negative aspects than the positives, and more the game-changing aspects. And it's crazy to see.
I, for one, am totally fine with people using their cryptocurrency to buy drugs. I think that it's absolutely ridiculous that, adults voluntarily can't exchange with other adults voluntarily. Anything along those lines that the government says should be illegal. Like, I think that, Ross probably did more. I don't even know if he's the person behind, the Silk Road, but certainly the Silk Road did more to, prevent wars and prevent people from dying than almost anybody else during that time frame.
That's actually such a fascinating point. In that sense, the Silk Road was also a very legitimate business. In that way, and
very efficient.
And in one way, you can almost look at it like it was like one of the earliest indications of the power of crypto in general, just the decentralized nature, that there is no middleman involved. You don't need a bank. you're in full control of your wealth, and it's amazing. And I definitely do agree with that point.
Were there any questions on the AMA that you did recently that you didn't fully answer, or you didn't get time to answer, that you want to kind of answer on the show?
And, the reality is there is no way to 100% clamp down on collusion.
Yeah.
We can only do so much to mitigate it by imposing, a set of incentives and disincentives. It's tough to completely clamp down on it. Hence, more of like the game theory aspects that we're rooted in, where whereby reviewers reach consensus by voting with the majority. I do think a lot of that will help mitigate certain attack vectors that are more like in terms of collusion, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're definitely hoping that like the economic incentives will, incentivize and disincentivize the behaviors that will work on the platform. So the question of collusion for us has always been like this regressive question where it's like, okay, well, what if the writers are colluding with readers, or what if they're colluding with reviewers? What if all the reviewers know each other? What if everybody's on the platform is colluding? It's just a really hard question to ask because we can say, all right, we're going to mitigate it here. Then they're going to be like, okay, yeah, but like, what if they're out? Like, what if they're outside, not using your platform, and they come into a group and all agree? Like, it's just it keeps going back, further and further. But what we're hoping to happen is just, based on the whole idea of this wisdom of the crowd concept, where the more and more people you get on the platform, the more honest that platform will become. We're just hoping that will kind of create the platform that we want.
Yeah.
I guess the perfect example of this is actually if you look at like Wikipedia. A decade ago or so, if you ask anybody if like you can create a platform where everybody can contribute information and it could be somewhat accurate, I think a lot of people would say that's not possible. But if you look at Wikipedia, it's very for the most part accurate. There's sources. Yeah, there's a little liberal tilt here and there, but more or less it works. So a lot of what we have in DNN, we kind of
What's crazy is that Wikipedia is working without people having any incentive.
Yeah,
they're
no
not
incentive
even
at all.
working for anything.
Yeah.
It's amazing how vibrant the community is of writers and editors, and there's just so many of them.
Yeah.
And they work tirelessly to get content on Wikipedia and make sure that it's not only accurate, but also, as neutral as it can be. And it's something that in practice shouldn't work, yet it does. And, there is, as far as we can see on the surface, very minimal collusion. Although I'm sure Wikipedia is, certainly not perfect. They do face, as Dondre said, accusations of liberal bias every now and then. And the fact is, nobody can be completely perfect. Even DNN, for that matter, won't be perfect. But we can, we can heavily mitigate, any factors of collusion amongst writers, amongst reviewers, and I think that'll be good enough. We can achieve a certain, a higher degree of credibility than the mainstream media.
Yeah, which apparently isn't that difficult from what it seems.
According to a lot of feedback we got, the bar is so low. Yeah, that it's something that is indeed, doable, and that's definitely our overall goal as far as the integrity of the platform is concerned.
When I look at something like Wikipedia, I can look at like the Ethereum entry, and it's pretty good. There seems to be a few people who are obsessed with Ethereum Classic that kind of keep that at like the top of it. What's your thoughts on Ethereum Classic, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, as soon as the DAO happened, like, we were, constantly looking at what was going to happen to Ethereum. And, once it split into like two, we were just like, oh my gosh, like, which should we stick with? But I think, we're more on the side of just sticking with the foundation and just going with Ether rather than ETC, just for the fact that, like, the way the foundation has been going, they've been very transparent. They've been very, like, a lot of people are quick to say, oh, well, what if the foundation tomorrow decides to, like, fork Ethereum because of this, But I think, for the most part, how they've been acting is pretty, been in the best interest, responsible, in the best interest of everybody. So, we're kind of siding with Ether, and I don't know what will happen with ETC. for the most part, I think most of the dApps are
we've joked a lot about a lot of the times ETC really goes up. It's because of people who aren't familiar at all with Ethereum or ETC, and they're getting confused between the two and thinking ETC is probably Ethereum.
Yeah, it's kind of gotten to the point now where I think, ETC hasn't become like this, alternative to Ethereum. It's almost a scam where, they deliberately are trying to, say that they are the foundation. When people invest in Ethereum, they're investing in the developer community. There's, hundreds or maybe 1,000, maybe thousands of developers working on it, and that's the reason why people invest, and they're really trying to. I'm going to call it's almost a scam now.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to that whole idea of everybody in theory, 100% decentralization sounds great, but when you have situations where certain things need to be done by a foundation that works in the best interest of the network. It just needs to happen, and that's why I feel like Ether's working, because they're not focusing on the currency. As a matter of fact, I think Vitalik in a recent tweet said he doesn't want to get involved with ICOs for the simple fact that he feels like some of them are speculative and they're just using his face. So just that alone just shows me that he's very interested in the platform and just making sure that developers
to a degree, I do think you need some overseer that works in the best interest of the community just to make sure that everything is going smoothly. We've seen a lot of the critics of Ethereum basically saying that, well, the fact that there is a foundation means that it's not decentralized.
Yeah, right.
And it just sounds like the wrong kind of criticism.
It does.
Is there anything about DNN that you wanted to talk about that maybe I'm missing that I didn't ask about?
So one of the things that we are thinking about for the reader is this kind of idea of kind of a micro payment. I wouldn't call it really a subscription per se, but it's a very minute amount of DNN tokens that they would essentially be paying to consume these articles and contribute to the network in whatever ways we allow. But one of the things that we want them to do also is kind of to vet articles. So essentially we have this idea called a bond, where if they see something about an article that is questionable or if the source is out of place, they can essentially wager tokens to get the article reviewed again. So DNN does have this idea of a post review. So it's not just it gets reviewed and then it's out there forever and it's done. We have this idea of kind of this ongoing review process.
Yeah.
So,
we're aware that certain pieces of content might slip through the cracks, and readers might point out inaccuracies after the fact. So we were thinking, what if there was a way for readers to sort of contribute to the platform as well, and also be incentivized to earn a portion of the payout for citing inaccuracies in articles and sending them back into review. So that's an idea we've been toying around with. We just wanted to quickly mention that since we didn't talk as much about the reader. We tend to talk more about the writers and the reviewers, but it's the readers that are essentially powering the interest in the platform. And it would be really interesting to have a way to incentivize them to contribute. And I think one of those ways is exactly what Don just mentioned, which is pointing out inaccuracies in an article after it's already published and getting it sent back to the reviewer, who can then look at it again and making sure that the sources are accurately represented, that a writer isn't necessarily twisting the sources to his or her own means.
And we would show the complete history, so it's not the reader can just be a bunch of readers can get together and say, yeah, all right, let's just totally get this article out of their back into review and keep doing that so no one can see it. We would show a complete history of all right, this article went in the review and this is the whole. Be extremely transparent about it, but yeah, it's an interesting idea.
Do you guys have a Twitter, a Slack? Kind of give the listener those places to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. So so if you want to find out more information, everything's on our website.
Yep, dnn.media. Everything's there: Twitter, Slack, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Yeah, we're always active on our Slack. So the direct URL for our Slack is just slack.dnn.media. And we're very much open to any questions, any criticism. We take it constructively. We love people if if you think of something that could like totally break the network, like tell us. Like we're gonna respond right away and just think it through with you. So yeah.
I want to thank you guys for coming on the show today. It's very interesting stuff. I hope I'm pretty sure it'll take off and provide improve this world a little bit by having more accurate news. First in the U.S. and then maybe worldwide.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us. This was great, and we love talking about this stuff and sort of we're still figuring out certain things. Especially when it comes down to the economics of the platform, and there's certain things that we're just kind of ironing out, certain details. But we're looking forward, just as much as everyone else, is sort of seeing how this develops and engaging the reactions of the people that use this platform.
All right, thanks, guys.
Ledger Wallet is a smart card-based Bitcoin hardware wallet bringing maximum protection level to your Bitcoins without sacrificing usability or control. Find the link in this episode's show notes. And now, Michael Adam of DocLaunch and Girish Ramchandra of Whipfly.
Great. So my name is Michael Adam, and I am the founder of DocLaunch. DocLaunch is a smart documentation platform built for the financial services industry and financial institutions. It's equipped to provide documentation management, execution, electronic signatures. It incorporates a payment solution, and importantly, it has a blockchain technology piece which helps record some of the key attributes that is happening through the smart docs.
My name is Girish Ramachandra. I work with Whipfly. Whipfly is an accounting and consulting firm started in 1930, headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We have about 40 plus offices in the US, 2 offices in India, or 1,800 people across the US. I lead the fintech group within Whipfly. My personal background is I have about 17 plus years experience in technology. About 10 years of them is in the entrepreneurial field. I was an entrepreneur building and serving financial technology clients. The company got sold in 2008 and I joined Whipfly in 2010.
Great. And now Whipfly is doing something with the blockchain now. How did that come about? How did Whipfly get interested in blockchain stuff?
Yeah, this is interesting because if you are alive, you cannot miss blockchain. Well, if you're alive in technology field, you cannot miss blockchain. Let me qualify that a little bit.
Yeah.
Whipfly is, even though one of the top 20 accounting firms by rank, Whipfly also has a significant technology presence. Through its acquisition of SpiderLogic in early 2000, Whipfly got into technology consulting business, and 1/3 of our revenue is from consulting, and out of that, about 50% of it through technology consulting. So we have a large technology consulting team, and as consultants, we have to stay ahead of what's happening in the technology world. Our clients ask us what's the latest solutions. So there are imminent problems to solve. So Whipfly came across blockchain as part of our client interactions, as part of what's happening latest in the technology. That's the initial part of it. But at the same time, on the other hand, our core business is accounting and tax, and blockchain has significant impact on the way we will do our traditional business in the future. So if whatever is happening is going to be true, we may not need a double entry bookkeeping system anymore. So where does that put our accounting business in? If all the taxes are recorded on blockchain, everything is tracked on blockchain, then the IRS may as well come back and give you your tax return, and we may not have to file a tax return anymore. So where would that put our tax business? So in AICPA, they have considered blockchain as one of the technologies to watch for 2025. So our technology consulting in combination with the potential impact of blockchain to our traditional business made us to sit up or stand up and take notice of this technology.
You certainly have like a pretty good vision of the future. How confident are you that blockchains will impact the accounting business, the accounting aspect of your business, and what's the time frame on that? I mean, it sounds like you guys, when I look at something like, the brick and mortar bookstores, they didn't really see, or maybe they didn't care about Amazon, or Blockbuster didn't care about Netflix and kind of laughed it off. This is just like blockchain really hasn't isn't mature and enterprise ready yet, but it looks like you guys are really paying close attention to it and making sure that if there is a change, that you'll be at the forefront of it.
Right. I do hope so. So you asked the question about the timeline. When we cannot reasonably forecast the timeline, I would like to quote Bill Gates here. Bill Gates said, "We always underestimate the change that's coming in the next 10 years and overestimate the change that's coming in next 2 years." So I would, in my personal estimate, over the next 5 to 10 years, pretty much everything that we are going to do is going to be impacted by blockchain. If you look at the largest companies by market cap in 2001, Walmart was number 5, GE as number 1 with the $406 billion market cap. So turn the clock to 2017 or 2015, Apple with $552 billion, followed by Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook are some of the largest companies by market cap. So these companies were not even there in the radar in 2001. So technology is pretty much taking over the world. So you also mentioned, you also alluded that some of the things people ridiculed when some of the technologies were coming up. For example, Steve Ballmer, CEO of Microsoft, earlier than Satya, said, "Google's not a real company at all. It's a house of cards." This was when Google was initially building up. CEO of Porsche said, "An iPhone belongs in your pocket, not on the road," about the driverless cars. And as recent as 2014, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, said, "There will be no real non-controlled currency in the world," and look at where Bitcoin is today. So I'm not only fairly confident, I would say very, very confident that blockchain is going to change the way we are going to do things. And this time it's not going to be a duct tape on the brick and mortar, like how e-commerce started making brick and mortar businesses online. But this time it's a lot of unicorns that are coming up using the Bitcoin and blockchain technologies.
Right, Girish, this is Michael, and I definitely agree with what you're saying. Steve, to kind of recap the conversation that Girish and I had a few days ago, when you look back talking about the cloud, when it was first being talked about, it was the private cloud. And then it became, well, let's talk about a semi-private cloud. And now it's just the cloud, which most people know what it is. So when you ask about implementation of blockchain, I think it's going to come in that type of a wave. So, it's already existing now, obviously, in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. But if you look at in the financial service industry, there is some, existence of a private public ledger, and then a semi-private public ledger, and then eventually it will just become, a public ledger. So I think it's there now, and it's being tested and implemented. So I think you're beginning to see the start of it. And from now, it'll just progress and progress and progress. I mean, you have some of the largest banks in the world working on their own systems. And what we're doing at DocLaunch and with Whipfully is bringing a true commercial product to the financial institution space. So, in my opinion, it's already out there. It's just evolving the way it needs to evolve to gain the acceptance that it needs to have.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about how, we know the world's going to change. We've seen how businesses have been resistant to technology, but then, they learn that an intranet isn't as good as an internet. They're going to learn that a private blockchain isn't as good as a public blockchain. But talk about a little bit more about, the old-fashioned way of document storage, your product and how it's using the blockchain to solve to change the way we're going to do things.
Right. Well, typically in the financial institution world, it was regulated that physical paper documents needed to be obviously signed and then stored and kept on presence of the location for years and years and years. And some of that legislation has changed. So if we take for the banking industry, they usually had to have, a notary sign a document. Well, now there's ways around that. That can be done through, a driver's license or something different. So the regulations in the banking industry are definitely loosening up and allowing for technology to increase efficiencies and speed up the process. Traditional banks are usually not the first adopters out there, so they tend to only go as fast as they're told to by their management team. So what we're doing with DocLaunch is we're considered all the regulations out there, all the rules that allow banks and non-traditional banking institutions, non-traditional FIs, to process their documents electronically. So giving them that tool that allows them to get through that process legally, quickly, streamlining their processes, reducing their costs, and making it much faster for them to complete the documentation process. One of the biggest hurdles in if let's look at a small business loan, for example, there's really two life cycles of documents that need to be collecting. There's the initial document collection, which is used for underwriting. And the thing that slows up that underwriting process the most, that drags it out, is the time it takes for the underwriters or for the credit team to collect those documents. So let's say there's 7 documents that the underwriter needs, and the applicant can only send in 5, and then they have to work on another one, and they have to find where to get it, and they need to fax it in or scan it in or email it in. That's one of the biggest barriers to a speedy decision process. And obviously, the longer the underwriting team spends on underwriting it, the more money that's costing them. And then the second life cycle is once a decision is made, and we're just going to assume an approval is the actual contracts. So that portion through DocLaunch uses our smart contracts capability to then get all the legalities signed from the borrower in an expedited fashion and brings it back to the financial institution.
What do you mean by that? Could you flesh that out? What's the smart contract? How does that fit into this?
Well, so when I say smart contract, I'm referring to the contracts the closing documents that would be signed from the financial institution, at which point we'll be able to pull some of the key attributes of those documents to create some distributed ledgers.
Yeah, I can add a little bit about smart contract there. Purely from the blockchain smart contract theory perspective, the term smart contract is pretty widely used,
right.
And and sometimes, in some cases, misused also. For example, the term is frequently used when considering whether natural language contracts can be adequately translated into computer code, or whether computer programs can themselves represent a legally binding contract. So there is a definitional confusion, but the idea of smart contracts originated, pretty early on, as early as 1994. I think when Nick Szabo, who came up, who is pretty often considered as the Satoshi Nakamoto of the famous Bitcoin blockchain white paper, but we don't know whether if he is the Satoshi Nakamoto. So Nick Szabo first coined this term called the smart contract. So he referred it as, just referring to my notes here, a computerized transaction protocol that executes terms of a contract. So Szabo's original idea of smart contracts was broad enough that he considered digital cash protocols to be a fine example of smart contracts. But his idea lay dormant for many years because the technology did not yet exist to support the implementation of smart contract. Then in 2009, the Bitcoin blockchain emerged, itself a limited form of a smart contract. However, later Ethereum offered enhanced ability to build more complex smart contracts by using a specific smart contract language called Solidity. So Solidity enabled developers to write complex processes in a short span of code. So the rise of these kind of protocols led to the kind of resurgence of the smart contract idea and its increasing popularity as a tool for enhancing the business process and efficiencies. So the integrating Nick Szabo's original idea into the new technological age of blockchains, it has proven difficult but not impossible. But recently, many companies have used sale of such smart contract based tokens, for example, as form of democratized crowd sale and such. So things have been evolving. Things have been in pilot stages. So smart contracts people have been trying it out, especially in the initial coin offering kind of a scenario. Smart contracts have been very effective.
Yeah, so is that what you're talking about, specifically in Ethereum or Ethereum-like class, basically? That's a smart contract. Is that what you're talking about when you're referring to DocLaunch?
No, for the DocLaunch product itself, it's the contract. Yeah, it's the contract between the lender and the borrower. So it's not the tokenized fundraising kind of a contract. It's more of the contractual terms between the lender and the borrower.
So do you have like a digital and analog type thing where there's like a paper-ish, maybe not a paper, but a digital copy of a piece of paper, and then also a Solidity version of the contract, and those are kind of both in step, or what are we talking here kind of specifically as far as the design go? Or am I asking the right question, or?
Yeah, we are getting there.
Yeah.
So the complete product is yet to be implemented. So there could be a paperish form of a contract, or maybe we will need to have a copy of the paper contract stored somewhere, even while we are implementing the smart contract on Solidity. So there is some kind of evolution that we need to think about. So the product is not out yet there. We are at the stage where we are visualizing a couple of scenarios to implement it.
Okay, is this like a pilot project for this is a pilot project, and you're just kind of getting started with it?
Well, so DocLaunch has been under development now for over a year, and over the last 6 months, we've been speaking with Whipfly and their team. So now it's kind of the emerging of the minds. So we've taken it to a point, and now with Wipfli being on board, we're going to ramp up production and spend the next 12 weeks really working on some of the things that we need to hash out. But we're in a full steams ahead phase now, and we're going to be more excited to be doing that with Wipfli.
So you kind of had the DocLaunch product being worked on, and there was not a blockchain component to it, and then you saw a need for a blockchain component.
Right. I mean, DocLaunch was something that in my mind was started 5 years ago, and that was just really identifying one of the pain points, one of the large pain points in the financial service industry, and that's the collection of documents. I mean, it just seems so outdated and just archaic. So the idea of the system was always there, and then when we started development over a year ago, it really just started to come to mind that yes, blockchain is coming. Financial service industries are definitely spending time on this. The government agencies that regulate traditional banks, such as the OCC, they're looking forward to this. They're proponents of this. So it was obviously kind of a natural evolution from, this is what we wanted to do 4 years ago to this is what we're building now. Obviously, we need to add a blockchain portion to this because it's just going to be the way it is going in the future. And then through our discussions in partnership with Wipfli, that's where it's obviously became a much larger thing.
So what's the main benefit of the blockchain for the DocLaunch product? Is it like identity management? Is it just better storage? Are you actually storing the documents in a blockchain like an IPFS, or are you just storing hashes of it so they're not so when you make a contract, you can store a hash of it. And if any part of the contract is changed, even the slightest bit, then the hash completely changes. And that's kind of like the major premise behind blockchains, and storing those hashes in Merkle trees. But anyways, is that the major component of DocLaunch, is the hashing of a document and then making sure that that hash doesn't change? Or is it there's an identity portion of it, and people have these identity keys that they can, sign documents with? Or is it both or neither? Or?
Yeah, I think yes, and also there is one more component to it. Is also we are also exploring and potential to track any assets that are potentially a collateral to a loan.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Yes, and yes.
There's I guess you're in Chicago area. Jeff Garza, I think, is working on something where Cook County land titles are going to be blockchain-ified.
Right.
So I mean, you can imagine a future where the property is on the blockchain. It's a tokenized asset, and then the transaction of I want to send this person $200,000 for this piece of property is the settlement. It's an instantaneous, here's the payment, you now have the house.
Yep. Yes. So, we have been in discussions with Cook County, and we have been closely watching that project. So one of the interesting things, though, that's evolving, I think it's the challenge that many people are facing today. That is the ecosystem around this specific project that is not able to catch up with the pace with which Cook County is doing things. So the vision is great, and I also think Cook County, whoever was leading this project, also is looking into another project of transferring auto title insurance, which is not title insurance, auto titles from one person to another person using the blockchain. So these are all projects that are taking shape. To become it more effective, for these to become more effective, I think we will also need an ecosystem that is going to develop. So one of the good things, though, is the state of Illinois has a blockchain business liaison, Jennifer O'Rourke, right now. and she is putting together a kind of a framework where state of Illinois can work on this more and more and bring a lot of participants together to build this ecosystem forward. Also, Chamber of Digital Commerce in Washington D.C. is helping us with liaising with congressional caucus of blockchain. So there is some work to be done before it becomes a larger ecosystem. But however, the reason that these all these things are important is uh, not you know not one is not to fall behind, but other one is there is a true potential to solve a lot of problems using blockchain. Just like the tracking of the assets or tracking of digital identities, and the things that are missing today in digital identity can be solved using blockchain distributed ledger. The digital identities across your own devices, and the contracts, while it is written on the on something like Solidity, it has a huge efficiency gain that we can gain in a project like DocLaunch.
Very interesting. So, Cook County, do you know more about the project itself of the land titles, or how did that go, and how is the car insurance swap going? That project. Do you know more about those or no?
A little bit, perhaps. I wouldn't want to comment for the government, but what I know today is they have published a paper. It's on their website. So they have published a full report of their pilot project of Cook County land title registration. So they have hit a wall with the government, saying that we need to invest more on the other infrastructure, and also they hit a wall of where there needs to be more budget to develop this full-fledged. One of their vendors also has not accepted the responsibility to legally record the titles on blockchain yet. So it's all in the report. So I'm quoting what is there in the public domain.
Okay. And you mentioned that are you part of the Chamber of Digital Commerce, or what is it like? How is the Chamber of Digital Commerce having a lot of struggle with regulators, or, I mean, do regulators even understand this stuff in the slightest bit?
Yes, they do actually. So I was actually surprised. Regulators and many people in Congress, I think their understanding is more than what we think they understand. And Digital Chamber of Digital Commerce has done a phenomenal job of raising the awareness about blockchain across both industries as well as in the political and the regulatory circles. They are interacting with various regulatory bodies like the OCC, like the FDIC. There are 100 regulatory bodies. So
what are the OCC and the FDIC? Oh, FDIC is Federal Deposit Insurance Commission. What's the OCC?
Right. OCC is the Officer of the Comptroller and Currency.
Yep.
And the reason that they are involved is, one, there are a lot of fintech companies that are coming up, and they are eating the market share of banks. So the consumers are impacted. So regulators have to take notice. So they understand what's happening in the fintech world. They are trying to come up with different charters. For example, OCC came up with a fintech charter very recently. Even though it's being sued for that fintech charter, but the things are in motion regarding how to look into this and how to regulate these upcoming fintech companies. Interestingly, Congress has a blockchain caucus, so they have invited corporates to present the case for blockchain in front of them. So Wifli is one of the representatives. So we we are meeting the congressmen from our area to make a case for blockchain and how it's beneficial on various in various industry circles. NIST, the National Institution of Standards and Technology, is also taking notice of blockchain and how blockchain can be used to help solve the problem of uniform digital identity across various government agencies. They know there is Homeland Security, there is NSA, and there are many other agencies, which can leverage blockchain technology and solve digital identity issues. So no, nobody is alone in this journey. I think a lot of people are taking notice of what's happening, and people are addressing this issue in a good pace than what we imagined. So, whenever companies like the DocLaunch are developing these things, I don't think this is happening in isolation. So this ecosystem is evolving. Of course, it has to evolve further before it can be more effective.
Yeah, you brought up a good case for blockchain plus digital identities, or blockchain plus regulation, documentation, those sort of things. I think blockchain in and of itself may be not that interesting. It's kind of interesting, but it's been around since 2010. Do you see a lot of blockchain plus in the space? Maybe blockchain plus Internet of Things, or blockchain plus what sort of combinations of technologies plus blockchain are going to really come together, and what sort of advantage would doing that have?
Right. Well, I really think it depends on what market we're talking about here, what industry we're talking about here. I mean, obviously, with DocLaunch, it's the documentation plus the blockchain. So I think anywhere where there's a real market need or a real thorn in the side of getting something done, that's where the blockchain plus is going to attach itself to. So, in our case, it's the contracts plus the blockchain and the assets that go along with the contracts. You can look into the healthcare industry, whether it's patient records or whether it's prescriptions. Just finding the need that's already out there, building a technology solution around that, whether it's an Internet of Things solution. But I think it's just identifying a need first and then seeing how blockchain can enhance that need.
Right. I agree totally with Michael. There is Internet of Things that can be very closely plugged in with the blockchain. I recently saw a very interesting business case which one of the manufacturers had already implemented. Consider a setup where IoT devices of a manufacturer operate on the same blockchain network. So the manufacturer deploys a smart contract that allows them to store the hash of the latest firmware update on the network. So the devices either ship with the smart contract's address baked into their blockchain client, or find out about it via a discovery services, right? And they can query the contract, find out about the new firmware, and request it by its hash via a distributed peer-to-peer file system. So the first request of this file will be served by the manufacturer's own blockchain node, but after the binary has propagated to enough nodes, the manufacturer's node can stop serving it. So assuming the devices are configured so as to share the binary they got, the device that joins the network even after the manufacturer has stopped participating in it can still retrieve the sought after firmware update and be assured that it's on the right file. So this all happens automatically, right, without any user interaction.
Mm-hmm. That's actually pretty cool. I think there's a lot of use cases when you buy an Internet of Things device and the company goes out of business or for whatever reason, and or they no longer support that particular item. It becomes a brick. It becomes completely useless. And when you have a blockchain plus Internet of Things plus distributed file system, I mean, it'll never brick out provided somebody else has software, which is really interesting.
Right. Yeah, I think even in the case of DocLaunch, I think the asset tracking could be a great way of tracking assets for the collateral against loan, or I don't know how the scenarios will emerge in the future. DocLaunch is in the starting stages, but there are many business cases that could emerge out of this, a simple storage or conveyance of information. The information is there available to use, but can it be open to public? Can it be open? Can other loan providers use the same information? I don't want to go too deep in here. I'll leave up to Michael to explain that further, or decide on that further.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of things. We've been thinking about whether it's just simple asset classification and tracking to how does this interact to other financial service industries? How does what we're doing at DocLaunch affect the title industry? How does, whether that's on the commercial side or the residential side? How do we feed into the regulators? So how do they gain access to some of the information that we're collecting? How does it feed into Whipley? How does it feed into the accountants? Whipley has a great number of financial institution clients that they are obviously doing accounting and auditing for every year. So does that transition look a lot smoother and cleaner? So there's obviously benefits and parallels in all the financial service industries because they're all working together and communicating together at some point. And that's one of the reasons that regulatory agencies like the OCC that are such proponents of this, because it's making their life easier, it's making their timelines faster, and it's putting more accountability and more security behind what they're trying to do. So I think there's many parallels here, and as the product gets released, and as we have some case studies going here, those are all things that will be found out.
Sounds exciting. There's a lot of projects. There's a lot of pilots. There's a lot of speculation of stuff that can be done, but there's not a ton of actual real-world apps that are out there, or applications of this technology yet. So you guys would certainly be at the forefront of it.
Right, and that's one of the reasons we're so excited to be partnering with Whipley on this one, because it's, as you said, there's not a lot of true commercial products out there, and we're going to be, one of the firsts for what we're focusing on. And, somebody's going to have to set the standard of what this looks like. Obviously, the largest banks in the world, when they create their own technology because they have the billions and billions of dollars to do so, they'll look at something the way they'll look at it. And then obviously the regulators will say, okay, we think it should look like this. But creating this with, somebody as knowledgeable and respected as Whipley, that is already in that accounting auditing space, they know how things, should look. So we're really just ecstatic to have this relationship, because we know that we can set a standard that has, logic and merit behind it. So that's, one of the things we're really excited about.
Right.
Was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about, or did I kind of cover everything?
Well, I could talk all day long about this stuff. But
yeah, I was about to say about to say the same thing.
When you said earlier it was a boring topic, I was saying it. My friends might think the same thing, but when they get me going on it, they know that they're either in for a long haul or they're going to have to excuse themselves and leave the room. So.
Yeah, so sometimes I guess I misspeak. I couldn't find the right words for it. It's like, I feel as if the true impact of blockchain is so much more than just currency. So when you have something like Bitcoin, its only real use right now is as a currency. There's no extra. There's almost nothing you can do extra with it. It's just a currency that's its main use. Yeah, maybe you can use the OP return to do a little bit with it. And yeah, maybe you can build on top of it and do something with it. But there'll always be a better application for it. I just mean you can have these digital currencies, these digital assets that have real world value. And I feel as if that point is just kind of already known. Like everybody knows it. It's taken for granted. Right. Not necessarily boring. It's just where's the cool stuff that we can do?
Right, and I think that's what's so important. Whenever I talk about blockchain, is just to separate it from Bitcoin, because obviously that's the birthplace and the precipice of where it began. But there's just so many more applications and implementation possibilities just within that theory of blockchain, and that's what we're really focusing on. With our innovations at DocLaunch and Whipley.
Yeah, not to forget that it has a huge social impact. So the financially underserved or financially not served people around the globe can hugely benefit with a digital identity, and that kind of digital identity is possible using blockchain technology. United Nations has partnered with Microsoft and Accenture to build digital identities for about 1.1 billion people who do not have an identity today. So imagine the power of that digital identity. Those many people coming on to a network where they can have access to financial capital, they can have access to credit. So that kind of social impact is very huge. Not to minimize the relevance of this to social impact, I think we will pretty soon find more use cases to make a financial inclusion impact of blockchain as well.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the most great aspects of this whole thing is how we're kind of in, the first world, or people in the second world. Their lives are going to be improved by blockchain, no doubt about it. But the impact it's going to have on, developing nations is just amazing. The underbanked or the unbanked, because they don't have identities. There's not financial services. To have that leapfrog, you see it with cellular technology. They didn't have to waste time building, landline systems. They just jumped to cellular, and they're going to do that with blockchain. They're going to bypass, a lot of the legacy banking system and just go right into blockchain, and that's going to be a huge boon to people in developing nations.
Right, and I think you're already seeing it in the, mobile payments world. The United States is really far behind when it comes to the adoption and acceptance of mobile payment solutions. But, in countries like India, there's products out there that are far superior and used all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is this upcoming company called Paytm, which is a fintech firm, so which uses mobile phones as your peer-to-peer payment device. So yeah, there are tons of examples of mobility of fueling this kind of innovation.
When do you think DocLaunch will be ready?
Well, we are shooting for fall of this year. So, we're hoping within the next 12 to 14 weeks.
Wow. That's a aggressive timeline.
Well, like I said, we've been doing some development on it for quite some time now, and now it's just getting over the hump, fine tuning everything, making it enterprise package worthy, and obviously that's one of the things that we're working on with Whipfly and their team.
Well, thank you both for coming on the show. I had a great time. Sorry that I misspoke a few times and asked stupid questions.
You did not. So that was wonderful, Steve. It is. I think you have a great art to moderate the discussions.
Well, thanks. I appreciate the compliment. I don't know if you're correct, but thank you.
Well, no, we appreciate you having us, and we're fans of the show, and we look forward to hearing all of your future awesome guests.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right,
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Steve.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Finally, Chris Robertson of the Blockchain Store.
Tell us a little bit about yourself for the listeners.
Yeah, so I am a technology consultant in the financial services industry, and I'm mostly working on payments and fintech-related projects. And also I'm really tasked with understanding how blockchain and distributed ledger technology is affecting the banking and capital markets industries, and how those industries will be disrupted by blockchain and distributed ledger technology. So that's really how I got interested in the space. I've known about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies from the very beginning in 2009, but really until the last couple of years, I haven't dove too deep into them. But as the technology has progressed and the number of use cases and number of implementations of blockchain, have gone up over time, I've really become a lot more interested and really realized how powerful the technology is. So now it's a major part of my life.
So you knew about Bitcoin in 2009. How did you hear about Bitcoin?
I heard about it from a friend, actually. I have a very tech-savvy friend who found out about it on a forum online, I believe. And he was telling me that I should learn how to mine Bitcoin on my laptop. And I kind of played around with it a little bit. Didn't do a whole lot and really regretting that. But I kind of fell out of touch with it for a few years. But then as the price continued to rise, I was really watching that, and also just the number of news stories continued to increase over time. So it was pretty hard to not get back into it and not start paying attention.
So I guess Bitcoin didn't really interest you that much. It's more of the digital assets and the distributed ledger technology that brought you back into it, or?
It's really both. Professionally, it's the distributed ledger technology and blockchain use cases that we're looking at for our banking clients and our capital markets clients. But on a personal level, I'm 100% interested in continuing to learn more every day about the various cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of the altcoins as well, just really understanding their effects on society as a whole, their effects politically, their effects on economies. All of that type of stuff is what I'm extremely interested in, and I really can't get enough of it. So both professionally and on the personal standpoint, I'm kind of involved in the world in both ways.
Let's talk about maybe I find the impact on society more interesting, but let's do the banks first. What do you see as use cases as far as like the big banks go in blockchain? What are they using it for? What do they intend to use it for? How's it going to have to change in order to be inviting to the big banks? Can they use Bitcoin, or does it have to be like a public-private pair like Hyperledger or Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, or what are they looking to do?
Right. So over half the largest global banks right now are at least engaged in some proof of concepts. So it's definitely growing in the industry. I think as far as the big banks, it's really not as far progressed as maybe the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency are in our space, just because there's still a lot of unknowns there. Part of it, my own speculation personally, a lot of higher ups at these companies just really don't understand the technology because it was something that was never around as they were going up through the ranks. And so they may not be familiar with it. I think a lot of the big banks are throwing money at it to just kind of test the waters a little bit, dip their toes in, see if maybe there is potential, because they don't want to be left behind, of course. And if it is disruptive, they want to be sure they're on the forefront. But really, from what I've seen, it's still minimal as far as implementation goes. But I see it as a huge potential, mostly in compliance with regulations and KYC and AML. I see. So after the financial crisis in 2008, regulators, they used their broad authority given to them by Congress to impose, I think it's upwards of like $400 billion in fines since then on the banks. So these fines and then the whole reputational risk have caused banks to sever their ties with a lot of the foreign correspondent banks that the regulators may deem suspicious. So the de-risking by the banks really has had a large impact on regional economies. I think it's the metric is somewhere around 25% of global correspondent banking ties have been severed since 2009, and that's especially prevalent in Africa and the Caribbean. So really the point is banks spend so much time and they spend so many resources just to try to understand evolving regulations that they're really erring on the side of caution, and they're cutting business ties with any potentially suspicious counterparty. As a result, that de-risking is actually forcing millions out of the regulated financial system and creating a large population that has no other alternative but to use gray market or illicit means to make payments. So cryptocurrencies is one of those remedies at this point. But I see blockchain as having a strong potential for banks in the KYC and AML space, because the smart contracts can be utilized to provide end-to-end transparency on the banking processes, and also it just prevents non-compliant behavior because it is hard-coded to be compliant. And so if blockchain and distributed ledger lives up to the potential that I think it could, KYC and AML processes are going to be streamlined, compliance costs will be reduced through automation, and this would open doors back up for working with all these correspondent banks while remaining compliant, because you're reducing the false positives, suspicious bank population. So I think that's one huge use case and probably the biggest driver from a cost reduction standpoint for banks. But the other one that you mentioned is also the remittances, international payments, building out that network of banks that can just make payments frictionless, seamless, and near instant around the world. So both of those are still getting played out, and I don't know of any huge implementations of those as of yet. It still really is in the design and build and kind of testing the waters to some extent. But those are the big areas that I'm looking at and focused on right now as the biggest value drivers for banks moving forward.
You mentioned like the higher ups at banks not being able to use Bitcoin. I've been around higher ups at banks and they don't even know how to use a PowerPoint, let alone Bitcoin. Typically, it's
that's the truth. That is the truth.
But so these banks that were getting cut off. Well, I have done some Bitcoin transactions recently. I bought like breakfast at a local restaurant, and there was a $4 mining fee on it. Well, the people in these countries that have been cut off, is $4 a good fee for them to have to use instead of the banking, instead of being able to, once they get cut off from the banking environment?
Yeah, no, I see it. I see it as almost no choice for a lot of people at this point because of the cutoff from traditional financial services. But really, I mean, I think that fee is getting to the point where it is pretty outrageous. But at the same time, demand is obviously there because those fees do keep climbing. So the network as a whole does have the demand on it to warrant those fees at this point. I don't think that's necessarily sustainable long term. And I'm very interested to see how this whole scaling debate plays out for Bitcoin specifically, to see where that goes. But I think at this point it's kind of a combination of speculation, of course, investment opportunity in Bitcoin, then you're mixing that with those that just not trust their government, they don't trust their economies, they don't trust their banking system, or they just don't have access to a banking system. So in those cases, it's kind of a necessity to use a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin in order to transfer value, store value, etc.
When you see, big banks using distributed ledger technology, like how far in the distance? I guess like 15 years. Would you say that's about accurate, or what's your own timetable on when the big banks would start using DLT in the wild?
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty fair estimate. They definitely move really slowly. There's no doubt about that. I actually kind of go back and forth debating in my head, kind of looking at it from one of two ways. So either true decentralized networks become a reality and are able to scale to the point where the majority of banks' business models are actually disrupted and big banks would shrink. And that's kind of the ideal world for most of the people involved in the crypto space. They really want to see those decentralized networks play out. But on the other hand, the banks have the power of just having pretty much endless money. So they can let all of these smaller innovative companies work on these disruptive solutions, and eventually they will just be able to buy them and integrate those solutions into their own processes. So I go back and forth between, are big banks going to be disrupted, or are they just going to be able to kind of buy their way through it? And really, I do think that over time, banks are going to be able to adapt some of these solutions and still retain their strength and their value because of the quantity of assets and the amount of power they have to be able to pay up for anything they want. So, and I'm not trying to bash the banks, because in reality, they do provide a lot of value for customers that have access to them. And they have continued to evolve offerings to meet evolving demand over time. I just see it as unlikely that this huge system we have in place today gets overhauled completely by something like Bitcoin. And also, as we've seen with Bitcoin, which is supposed to be a decentralized payments network, we're still tending towards centralized solutions over top of it, such as Coinbase, other exchanges, wallets, which, just like the banks, they add a lot of value by allowing individuals who are not tech savvy about buying and storing their own crypto to be able to get in the game. But the significance is that the banks will continue to add that layer of value, I believe, even if there is a paradigm shift to heavier international cryptocurrency use, because we're still struggling to have a truly decentralized network. We find ways to make a centralized solution over top a decentralized network.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. There definitely seems to be, a big need to have, to make it easy, to make it easy for a lot of people. It's tough. I mean, when you first hear about Bitcoin, you want to maybe learn as much about it as you possibly can, and a lot of the stuff really isn't necessary. Like, you want to know about mining. That's always like the first question.
Right.
And in today's world, you don't. It doesn't really matter that much unless you have hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're near cheap electricity or cheap cooling. You're not going to make your money back or something like that. So, but it's kind of like you need these other systems to kind of like say, if you want to buy Bitcoin, just go to Coinbase and they'll handle all the difficult to manage your keys and try to keep it safe. They did have a security scare last week or 2 weeks ago, and I think that's something that I don't know, a lot of people have heard about. But Authy is a security feature that they had used, or you could use Google Authenticator, and Authy isn't very secure, so it kind of goes with any site. Sorry to go on a side tangent here, but if you're using Authy for any of your crypto stuff, you should probably switch to something different, like Google Auth. But so you talk about the big banks. You see, what else do you see? Like, what are the big other industries that will be, affected in a way? And will any of them be affected more so than the banking industry?
Yeah, capital markets is a huge one. Anything contract related, so smart contracts allowing for any equities, any assets to, pretty much real time be transferred, transfer of ownership from one person to another and settled within seconds versus right now, typically 3 days or so to settle any asset getting traded. And I think a huge area is definitely going to be identity management going forward. I think at the government level, there's a lot of opportunity there to adopt some identity management systems, utilize that for property ownership, just controlling your own healthcare records, controlling your own life pretty much, and hopefully giving some of that data privacy right back to the consumer by allowing them to have the private key access into their own world. That would be the ideal solution in my mind moving forward, is as these things get developed, people kind of take back some of the power that we may have lost with the internet and with our data, and you're able to control that to some extent. And of course, it's tough because we do get a lot of value, like you mentioned, we get a lot of value from those over-the-top solutions like Coinbase. That allows people who would otherwise not be able to participate at all get into it, and I think that's a great value add there. So I think in the future, as these networks continue to evolve and play out, that's where a lot of the value is going to come in the disrupted industries, where we're losing a lot of the middlemen that put one party with another, whether it's a retailer like Amazon connecting a buyer and a seller, whether it's a lawyer, deciding what's correct for the law, which could eventually be replaced by smart contracts. All of that, as those middlemen kind of get pushed away because of all of this automation with blockchain, that's where the value add is going to be helping you manage your own data, your own life, and making sense of it. That's kind of where I see it going.
Yeah, I think you really touched on the big spaces, insurance, identity, healthcare. Those are the places that people are, believe that this technology is going to have the biggest impact. Certainly privacy, the ability to maintain your identity, maintain your own health records, kind of, show your health records to somebody as a doctor when you want them to have it, and then revoke that access as soon as, you want to keep that private. And I think that's something that, without blockchain, it's just not practical to do. You have medical records that are in, 20 different formats. I don't know if that's correct, but in many different formats, and they're, stored in 20 or 30 different locations, and it's just impossible to really have one health record. And you don't want to have, a company owning your health record. You want to own your own health record. You want to give your health record, you want to give your physician access to it, or your insurance company access to it for a brief period of time where they do the calculation, and then you want to be able to revoke that access, and so they can't see it anymore. And I think that's going to be really cool when blockchain enables that.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. I think we're definitely on the same page there.
What about investing? Did you see the flash crash on Ethereum today?
I did. Yeah, no, myself personally, I don't let those little swings bother me one way or the other. I mean, obviously, crypto is trading heavily on news, and for me, I believe in Bitcoin. I believe in Ethereum long term. So I don't really get caught up in the day-to-day craziness and the swings, but it's definitely I can see where it's very unsettling for some people, and it's pretty crazy how quick things can just change like that with one little news story coming out, and just all hell breaks loose to some extent. It's very interesting.
Yeah, there's speculation that the flash crash was from somebody who must have, like a whale who sold a bunch of Ethereum, like 100,000 Ethereum, in an effort to get margin calls GDAX just upped their margin limit to like 10 grand or something you could have in margin, and the speculation is that somebody with a lot of money decided to keep selling because it's a very illiquid order book, triggering all of those margin calls to get liquidated, the margin positions get liquidated, and then buy back at cheap. So they bought every order up to like 10 cents. And so then that forced, people who had more margins to get their entire position, for sale at market sale, and the whale then bought back everything up for cheap. So it went from, $320 some odd dollars to 10 cents in, a minute, and then back up to 300. It was pretty strange. But besides Bitcoin and Ethereum, what altcoins do you like, if any?
I like them all. I like them all for different reasons, of course, and that's why they're all coming about. Personally, I'm a little hesitant to call them investments and invest in any of them at this point. I do have a little bit of Litecoin, a little bit of Dash, just kind of playing around. But as far as investing, I'd say it's tough to tell. Of course, you can't tell the future. Bitcoin and Ethereum definitely have the network effects, first mover advantage going on. But that's not to say that those aren't going to get overhauled by something else at some point. So I'm kind of dipping my toes in the water a little bit, speculating to some extent, but I'm sort of, I guess I don't know enough technically, and I'm not a good enough predictor of the future to say one way or the other. But I really do think that it adds value to the crypto space as a whole, and it adds value to Bitcoin and Ethereum by having all of these other altcoins introduced, because we get to see some of the limitations and some of the advantages that they all provide. And in the end, I think we're going to come out of this with many different cryptocurrencies that can be used for their respective strengths, and they'll kind of be bettered over time by everything we've learned from all of these other projects going on. So overall, definitely a good thing, and I'm enjoying seeing the changes daily and which coin's ahead of which and all of that sort of thing. It's really fun to follow.
What are the advantages of Litecoin? You said you had some Litecoin and Dash. What do you like about Litecoin and Dash?
I don't know enough technically to say a whole lot with them. The main Dash was actually the first altcoin that I kind of tested the water with, just solely because I heard one of the founders on a podcast and really liked what he had to say. I liked the different value adds there, the instant send, the private send, the different opportunities that they added on top of it, which was something that Bitcoin didn't really. I mean, Bitcoin is just it's the one thing right now, right? So that was the reason I kind of dove into that. I don't really have huge strengths of one over the other personally. Is there something that you're looking at particularly with the different cryptos and altcoins?
Just wondering, like I look at Litecoin and I don't necessarily see a huge advantage of it. It's like a slightly faster block time than Bitcoin.
Right.
It's got, some of these altcoins, it seems like what happens is, like you were able to mine on a laptop back in 2009.
Yeah.
And, soon, very, very quickly, mining on a laptop became impossible. You had to have a graphics card.
Exactly.
And then shortly after that, you had to have an ASIC. And what happened is a bunch of people had these big rigs. I don't know. A bunch of people had these, mining rigs that were set up with GPUs that no longer could mine Bitcoin. And so then, like, a new altcoin is created, like Litecoin or something, that uses Script, which is a different mining algorithm, and says, like, this will be ASIC resistant. And now all the GPU owners can mine it again, and everybody rejoices and celebrates. And I think of Litecoin, and then what happened with Litecoin is a bunch of other coins use Script because they saw that it was, different than SHA-256 or better in a lot of respects, a lot more resistant, and more people did it. Now you have, script ASICs. So when I look at something like, I think a lot of these altcoins are just trying to find a way to extract money from the system by kind of just copying what was there before, but redoing it so miners, and the developers and the miners can make a bit more scratch. I don't think that was the case with Litecoin. I think there was a legitimate issue with Bitcoin, and it solved a legitimate problem at the time. So I think about that a lot when I look at altcoins nowadays. I'm looking for an altcoin that, really brings something new to the table, something, vastly different than what's already out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's those are very fair points, and really, Litecoin, I guess, being the next up in market cap. I think a big part of that, and I guess some of the other altcoins too, when they're really just a way to move in and out, or sorry, the opposite, moving from Bitcoin to those. Whenever there's bad news on Bitcoin, that usually tends to drive up some of the prices on those other high market cap altcoins, like Litecoin, for example. And so I really think it's, in a lot of cases, it's just straight speculation. It's a way to kind of jump around between various coins depending on the news ferry. It's really, I'm with you in a lot of ways, that we're at the point it's so saturated in the market. It really is a question of what is actually getting value add here by having another 100 altcoins that really do nothing different. So I'm on the same boat as you in that regard.
You also have a website that has a very similar motto to what we have. What's the motto of your website, and what's your website?
Yeah, so I started a project a few months back. So my first big project diving into the crypto space outside of my professional life, I started a online store called the Blockchain Store, and it's at blockchainstore.xyz. And the motto, the mission of it is to just promote widespread public adoption of crypto, of blockchain, and distributed ledger technology. So my thought going in was just what's the best way to make sure that everyone in the public is aware of these? How can we spread the word? How can people better their lives through this technology? And the simplest way is to just wear clothing or have products that sport the different logos, so Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. Because if I can wear a shirt that has the Ethereum logo on it on the train going to work, and even just one person in Google searches Ethereum, that's a big win in our space. So I started this online store, and I have some Bitcoin, Ethereum, the altcoins like Steam, Dogecoin, Litecoin, a few others, and I'm really just starting this project as to help promote. So far, I've really enjoyed doing it. I've learned a lot through doing it. Learned how to build a website, how to code a little bit, how to do that sort of stuff. So it's been a learning experience for me. I'm hoping that it value to the as well.
Kind of broke up there at the end a little bit, but you know a whole lot about blockchain and distributed ledger tech, and way more than most people. It's your knowledge is certainly impressive in this space.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
But so you didn't know how to build a web page before you did this project or website?
No. So everything was fresh. So
What did you use?
I knew I wanted to do something, and that was the decision that I came to. So first I learned how to build the website. Then I learned how to set up the inventory and work with the supplier. And then after that, I figured out how to do some of the customized coding on the website. And then from there, focused on the SEO and trying to, get everything fleshed out, make sure everything's working great. But so far, even if I don't make any money on this, even if I stay in the whole negative money, I've learned a lot through doing it. And hopefully hopefully somebody out there finds value in it, and we'll find something that they like, whether it be a shirt, a sweatshirt, a coffee mug, whatever it may be. I'm hoping it'll provide some value in some way.
Do you accept crypto, or?
I do. I don't have an automated crypto setup just because of limitations in my website provider, but I will accept Bitcoin, Ether, or Litecoin. So I have an option when you go to check it out. You can just select offline payment, and then once the order is complete, I'll just reach out to you personally, and we can agree on what the fair market price is for Litecoin, Ether, Bitcoin, whatever you choose, and I'll gladly accept that as an option. It'd be pretty crazy to have a crypto store online and not accept that.
Yeah. Was the friend that introduced you to Bitcoin in 2009, was he named Satoshi at all?
I wish I had an in on that. I wish I knew who that was.
Did we cover everything, or am I missing anything, or?
I think we covered a good amount. I thought it was a very good discussion.
It was definitely a good discussion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me. The pleasure's all mine, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it, because I had a lot of fun talking.
All right, Chris. Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Right.
Thanks a bunch.
Yep, bye.
The Blockchain Show is a team effort by Steve Anderson, Heather Sullivan, Ethan Kinnekinect, and Sarah Hempling. To learn more, visit theblockchainshow.com.